Here to make a bit of sense of this for us, it's Peter Chase from the German Marshall Fund who's joining us live. Peter, great to speak to you. We know that agriculture has been an impasse for the Europeans and the Americans for a while. How significant is this apparent breakthrough?
Well, I think it's extremely useful that the United States and Europe have agreed on this deal on beef, not least because it shows that there's ways to make progress in US-EU trade, which should be a very good story, but recently has been less good than it should have been.
Well, Peter, looking at this, we know for a long time there have been concerns over certainly concerns in Europe among European farmers that allowing greater access to the Americans would somehow lower standards. How has that issue been resolved then with this agreement?
In this case, there's no problem with food safety standards because the only beef that's being allowed to be imported is beef that's grown without the use of growth hormones, which has been the main problem in US-EU trade. So what the EU has agreed to do is to give a certain part of the quota for this, what they call Hilton beef, to come into the EU up to, I believe it's 75% of the quota. And this is because the quota started for this hormone-free beef. It started as a result of a dispute that the US and the EU had about the use of hormones in beef.
Well, Peter, interestingly here, we've had Donald Trump, he sort of made a joke during that conference that no other president has stood up for farmers and ranchers like he has. It seems his playing hardball with the European Union, he would say it's worked. Do you think Donald Trump's trade stance here has been what broke the impasse?
Yes and no. And the reason I say yes and no is because this dispute, of course, predates the Trump administration for a long time. And what had been going on was that the EU had created a quota for the import of this hormone-free beef, but the United States was not getting the amount that it was supposed to get under the WTO rule. So in a sense, this is part of a ongoing negotiation that has predated the Trump administration. But I think that the fact that Mr. Trump is being, shall we say, robust in his approach to trade has increased the importance for the EU and the member states to try to reach agreement with the United States on things like this to remove the irritants to our trade relationship.
Look, I have to ask you about this. I know everything doesn't always lead back to Brexit, but you've got the US president there stood with the European Union flag behind him, and yet we know that when he's with Boris Johnson, he's talked up the benefits of Brexit. If you're the European Union dealing with President Trump, are you treating him as a friend or a foe?
If I were the European Union dealing with Mr. Trump, I would treat... It's not a question of who the president is, it's the United States. The United States is a friend and an ally of the European Union. Mr. Trump is looking at, and clearly is respecting, as European leaders do, the UK's decision to abrogate its treaty relationship with the 27 and leave the EU. The fact that he's giving support to the UK, I think, is probably accepted warmly by some parts of the British population and probably not looked at very nicely by many people in Europe who would prefer for the United Kingdom to remain part of the European Union.
So, yes, I mean, obviously it's interesting seeing the president having warm words about the European Union on one occasion, less so on another. But, Peter, just going back specifically to this agreement, what's in it for Europe?
In this specific agreement, there's nothing specific for it in Europe. It's a one-way resolution to a previously existing trade dispute where the EU lost a judgment of the World Trade Organization. And because it lost that judgment, that is, the WTO found that the ban on the use of growth hormones in beef was not supported by science, they created a deal, and it was a good compromise between the United States and Europe, whereby the United States would be able to export beef here that did not have the growth hormones. So it meant the EU's rules and removed a trade problem between us. And I think the United States and Europe should look to that agreement and try to find other ways to resolve existing other disputes, like the dispute we have over Airbus and Boeing, or the dispute we have over biotech, even biotech. These are things that can be resolved if the two sides put their mind to it.
Peter Chase from the German Marshall Fund. Really fascinating to get your take on that, those words from President Trump and announcing that agreement from the EU. Thank you very much.